You gotta have knowledge for life. You gotta have knowledge for life. You gotta have.
Here's what our values are, and we hold these dear. And if you become a member, you will be held accountable to this. If you cannot uphold the principles of our Constitution or bylaws, then you can't be in the organization. It's that simple. It's that simple. We will put you out. Okay. We value devotion to duty, loyalty, freedom, self-reliance, and the sanctity of women and children. As Mike said earlier, we are diametrically opposed to the exploitation of women and children, illicit drugs, any kind of criminal activity. We are diametrically opposed to it. Okay? Goals, we fight to achieve the following goals. Restoration of your civil, economic, political rights. That's what being a citizen is. Those are the rights that you have as a citizen. The abolition of racial and ethnic disparities in all aspects of the U.S. criminal justice system. If they exist, then we challenge them. Creation of business and employment opportunities for them. That's what Mike talked about. We need to create those. We don't look for other people to create those opportunities for us. Divest in organizations that promote the cyclic exploitation and disenfranchisement of ex-felons via the penal justice system. If you profit in any kind of way from the penal justice system and you don't hire ex-felons, but yet you profit from them, you become a target. You become a target for us. We're talking about using the same tactics and strategies, the same language that we used to defeat slavery, that we used to defeat Jim Crow, that we used to defeat apartheid. That's what we're talking about. Okay, now we're going to go into the history of disenfranchisement so you really know what it's about. It starts here with the U.S. Constitution. Okay? We're going to go into slavery a little bit. We're not going to give you too much a history lesson. The whole point is to let you see how important it is to be a full citizen in the United States and why certain people want to take those rights away from you. Slavery. Reconstruction of the Reconstruction period, the defeat of slavery. We were part of that. We helped to defeat slavery when we united. We can defeat disenfranchisement. We'll talk about that later. The Black Codes, Jim Crow, the defeat of Jim Crow. We united again, defeated Jim Crow. Okay? Mass incarceration of black males and Latino males was the transformation of Jim Crow. Jim Crow, the Black Codes and Jim Crow were the transformation of slavery. Systems don't just die, they transform. Okay? So we must be ever vigilant to make sure that when the next transformation takes place, that we're in front of it. Okay? The Constitution, you know, it's written by the property class. You didn't have property, you didn't have anything to do with that. Okay? Protected individual rights from the encroachment of federal and state governments. You guys are familiar with the Bill of Rights. We don't have to tell you much about that. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, right to bear arms. You know about all of that kind of stuff. The first 10 had to do with individual rights. Okay? Those that it declared citizens were franchise persons. Did you know that that's really what it was about? You only had two categories of people in the United States, the franchised and the disenfranchised. If you were franchised, then you were a citizen. If you were disenfranchised, you were not a citizen. And you didn't have the rights that the franchise enjoyed. Okay? Franchised persons were protected by it, while disenfranchised persons had little to no rights. Slavery, that was about the period 1619 to about 1865. Slaves were disenfranchised persons. Therefore, the Constitution did not apply to you. You were property, and you could be treated as such. Okay? For apportionment in the House of Representatives, slaves were counted as three-fifths of a person. That was so the southern states could have a larger apportionment in the House of Representatives, right? That's what that was about. Southern states benefited, of course, as slaves were not afforded protection of their individual rights and were considered property. We fought. We didn't want to be disenfranchised, so we fought. And we abolished slavery. But look, this is the 13th Amendment. Take a look at it. It says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States, except as punishment for a crime of which you have been convicted. Okay, so we're going to end slavery. And I don't know if you know this, but it were the Republicans who ended slavery. It was the Republicans who started Reconstruction. We want you to know that. The Democrats were Southerners. Were mainly Southerners. Southerners. We know it was them that inserted this part. You know why? They were defeated. Their towns and their cities were destroyed. Who do you think was going to rebuild the South? Hey, we need this exception in there. We're going to need these slaves, these so-called freedmen, to rebuild the South. And that's what happened. At the same time, you had what we call the Black Codes. Right. Are you familiar with the Black Codes?
Yes, sir.
It was about disenfranchisement, again. The Black Codes. In other words, you can't vote.
Right.
Were the states. They were pretty upset. They were defeated, right? These Northerners, these Republicans, going to tell us what to do? No, we're going to fight. During the Black Codes, you couldn't own firearms, which means you couldn't protect your life and your property, right? Everything that we love in this country starts with property, doesn't it? Owning something. So you need to be able to protect it. So that's what the Constitution allows you to enjoy, the protection of your property and your life and the pursuit of happiness, right? Owning things. Serve on a jury in a lawsuit against whites. Well, you couldn't do that.
Exactly.
You couldn't do that.
No.
Move about without employment. Pay attention to that.
Exactly.
Move about without employment. Do you know what happened if you couldn't prove that you were employed? You got locked up. It was a crime.
Right.
Like they did that in the 60s.
Yeah.
Still doing it now.
Yeah, they doing it.
Are they doing it now?
Yeah.
They paying people to be unemployed, aren't they? Back then, you couldn't be unemployed. They put you in jail. They make you a slave. Of little effect, though, because the federal troops, the Republicans said, well, they're not going to buy it, so let's send about 20,000 federal troops down there and make sure that they do what we tell them to do. Okay? And they set up the Freedmen's Bureau. So, hey, you can have all the Black Codes you want to. They don't fall up under your purview. They fall up under the purview of the Freedmen's Bureau. Reconstruction Amendments. The 13th Amendment, of course, you know, abolished slavery. That's where the exception was. The 14th Amendment guaranteed citizenship. In other words, we're going to make you a franchised person. Equal protection under the law. Okay, when you go into the court system, you have the same laws that every other citizen has. Due process rights. Well, the states just can't do what they want to do. They have to go through some type of procedure, legal procedures in the courts. Okay? 15th Amendment, guaranteed voting rights. Why is everybody talking about voting rights? Voting rights must be important then to citizenship, to franchise persons. That's why if they were trying to take your right to vote, then it must have been very important. But yet we have many of our people not voting, right? I like this part at the bottom. Also referred to as the Black Constitution. I got that from Claude Anderson. I thought that was pretty nice. Also referred to as the Black Constitution. Jim Crow. Well, like anything else, things don't last long. Federal troops were pulled out. It was a compromise, right? Between the North and the South. The South had, you know, you just, don't you?
Yes, sir.
Third round. Dominated
I'm on.
after federal troops left the South. It was a compromise. We're out of here. Well, what do you know? The Ku Klux Klan.
Right. Come on,
The
brother.
Ku Klux Klan comes into play during this period. Free blacks were again disenfranchised. So disenfranchisement, as we can see, has always existed. And it, for the foreseeable future, will probably always exist. Here we come again. We don't take it for long. It may take us some time to gather our forces and to unite, but when we do, this is what happened. Defeat. Civil Rights Act of 1965. I want to remind you, that wasn't the first one. There was also a Civil Rights Act of you just said it, 75, right? Ulysses S. Grant,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
the last Reconstruction president, right? Keep in mind, well, I have that up here, so I don't have to restate that. Civil Rights Act of 1966, of course, all of that had to do with voting and public and access to public facilities. Well, here we go again. That didn't last long. Mass incarceration of black and Latino males, the new Jim Crow. America has the highest incarceration rate in the world. Don't talk to me about Russia. Don't talk to me about China. Don't talk to me about, who's the guy that just died? North Korea. Kim Jong-il. Don't talk to me about those countries. The United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world. Since 1920, no more than 0.2% of the U.S. population was behind bars. 50-year period, right? No more than 0.2%. From 1980, who was on the scene in 1980? You know?
Ronald Reagan.
Ooh, y'all remember that?
Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
Okay, from 1980 to about 2008, that percentage quadrupled to 0.8%, with the steepest increase under President Reagan, who was a friend of apartheid South Africa. You remember Randall Robinson in Trans-Africa? He said, hey, we're going to overcome South African apartheid. We're going to try to force countries of the world, including the United States, to put pressure on South Africa. Reagan, I don't want to do that. And I'm going to stop at this point and turn this part over to our legal strategist, Mr. Edward Levi Jones.
Glad everybody can make it today. You know, with what he was just talking about, collateral sanctions, it's a term that a lot of people don't realize the true significance of. And he was just giving some numbers in as far as the incarceration of individuals in this country. But did you know that by December the 31st, 2008, in all the state repositories across the United States that hold the criminal records, that they have the criminal records of over 100 million Americans. So that means that each one of those Americans that got a record, regardless of what it was that they were involved in or they did to get the record or to get the conviction or serve the time, it's after they have paid their debt to society, so-called, that the problem comes in with these collateral sanctions. Now, when we talk about collateral sanctions, what's the term collateral sanction? It's used here to mean a legal disability that occurs by operation of law because of a conviction that was not a part of the sentence. These are sanctions that you are suffering not because of what the individual did or what the individual was charged with, but because of the mere fact of the conviction alone. You end up, it's collateral because it's not part of the direct sentence. It's a sanction because it applies solely because of a conviction of an offense. Now, what are some of the collateral sanctions that people are suffering from? For example, we had one case where this lady had spent quite a few years to get a degree so that she could become an RN, only to find out after she got the degree that there was no way possible that she could become an RM because of a past criminal record. See, when you, in recent years, collateral consequences have been increasing in number and severity. Federal law now imposes dozens of them on state and federal offenders alike. To identify just some of those applicable to individuals with drug convictions. You take in 1987 legislation made these individuals with drug convictions ineligible for certain health care benefits. Then in 91 they came up with a law that required states to revoke some driver's license upon conviction or lose their federal funding. Then in 93 Congress made individuals with drug convictions ineligible to participate in the National Community Service Trust programs. Then in 96 Congress provided that individuals convicted of drug offenses would automatically be ineligible for certain federal benefits. Then a year later, Congress rendered them eligible for the Hope Scholarship tax credit. Then in 98, individuals convicted of drug crimes were made ineligible for federal educational aid and for residents in public housing. Then in 88, additional legislation authorized state and federal sentencing judges to take away eligibility for federal public benefits. So the bottom line is even though you have committed offense and that you've been convicted and that you served your time, you're still going to suffer consequences as a result of that. And those consequences, those collateral consequences, are what we're talking about here today as far as the reform is concerned. Most states haven't developed a comprehensive and effective way of neutralizing the effect of convictions in the case where it's not necessary or appropriate for the individual to continue to suffer as a result of those prior convictions. And what we're going to find out also is that the system and the way that it's set up now, the justice system that we have right now, I'll sometime refer to it as McDonald's, a fast food. Individuals no longer have the full scope of the rights that they had as criminal defendants, where before the rights that you would have going when you're going through the criminal process, those rights have been curtailed a great deal to the point to where the majority of the criminal cases are solved by what they call plea bargaining. And what's happening to a greater degree, especially in the black community with young black males, is they're being stacked with charges.
Right.
So that they will plea bargain, and then these bargains are happening and these convictions are happening without these individuals having any awareness of what the full penalty that they're going to have to pay, not just then, but for the rest of their life. And that's the main thing that we intend on addressing in penal reform now, is the collateral consequences that that we're all suffering as a result of. See, before, it'd be a thing where, like 10, 20 years ago, it'd be hard pressed for an administrator if, say, a lady comes in and she got a conviction maybe 5 or 10 years ago for some little misdemeanor thing or some little, it would be hard for them to come up with that information, to come up with that conviction. But nowadays, the way that it is, with the advent of the internet, and I just went through a thing myself down the court system, because I told the judge, Your Honor, I had a driver's license for 6 years here in the state of Ohio. Then all of a sudden I don't have a driver's license no more. Why? Because they integrated all the driver's licensing bureaus back when Homeland Security came into effect, and they came with a ticket from 1979, one from 1983, till right now I'm still fighting, trying to get my driver's license straightened out as a result of that. So these convictions, these dealings with the criminal justice system have far-reaching consequences. Just because a person makes a mistake, just because a person, I mean, people change. All of us are human. None of us are perfect. So in a society, especially one like the United States or the culture that we have,
You're going to have that. People are going to run afoul of the law. But that doesn't mean that that person should have to pay for that mistake for the rest of their life. And I think that's one of the main intentions that we have of addressing as far as those people that have been disenfranchised because of those records and those convictions. Now, there's right now I'm in the process of I have quite a few people that I'm helping do expungements, because after you have a certain period of time, and you'll come to find out that those expungements are really simple documents, the way that they've developed them into the legal systems across the states now. They're just like a couple pages to be able to alleviate that and seal that record up. But what happens is, as long as that record is open, anybody can go on the internet and put your name in it, and you're trying to apply for a job, and I just had a case of a person that tried to get a job down in Sinclair. And because 8-9 years ago they had a misdemeanor theft charge, they told them no deal, even though it was only a little misdemeanor charge. So those are the main issues that we intend to address as far as penal reform now, is to try to lessen the effect that that has as far as the disenfranchisement that those ones are suffering. It's a big part of our community. There's a lot of people and our family members, our friends, that everybody knows somebody that's been in jail. You know, so, and not everybody that goes to jail are bad people. They just made mistakes and they need help. So that's pretty much where we're at with the collateral sanctions and the consequences. So I'll turn it back over to Marlon.
All right. Okay. So hopefully now you can see what we're talking about. This is a case of citizenship versus non-citizenship, and all that goes with that. That's the basic case. So of course, the disparities don't exist without a reason. Okay? There are many disparities in the criminal justice system. In terms of numbers, if you want to talk about at any given time how many young black males, I'm just going to stick with young black males, at any given time from about 3.5% to about 5% of our young black males are incarcerated in jails or in prisons. Now, that number doesn't really mean anything until you compare it to other groups. Whites, about 0.5%. Latinos, 1.7%. But ours, of course, is at a very disproportionate rate compared to other racial and ethnic groups. So we want to try to address that, and some of the ways that we're going to address that, as we mentioned earlier, there are some internal things that we have to do. There's no doubt about that, and that should be where a lot of our focus is. But there's some external things that we have to do as well. There's some environmental things that we have to take care of politically, educationally, economically. Now, if you are familiar with the strategies that help us overcome slavery, if you're familiar with the strategies and tactics that help us to overcome Jim Crow and South Apartheid, you can imagine that being a member of this particular group, you're going to have your work cut out for you. We're talking about the same. We're talking about boycotts. We're talking about sit-ins. We're talking about marches. These are some of the things that had to be done in order to overcome those systems. You know, we have to have a media campaign. I'm not going to go into too much more detail at this point, because I want to now open it up for your questions.
You gotta have knowledge for life. You gotta have knowledge.